Coming up on today's Locked On Bucks, we take a look back at Saturday night's a good game, all things considered, for the Bucks, but unfortunately not the results you were looking for. So what are some of the primary takeaways from that game? How many of those can you apply towards the game tonight in Cleveland against the Cavaliers? Just the overall state of this Bucks basketball team. We dig into it as we hope the team digs out of it. Coming up after this on Locked On Bucks.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Bucks. I'm Justin Garcia, joined as always by Camille Davis. We thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first listen each and every day. Free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on YouTube as well. And now your favorite podcast is also a newsletter. The Locked On Bucks newsletter, one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage delivered directly into your inbox. You can sign up for free now at lockedondaily.com, lockedondaily.com, and start your day with the all-new free Locked On Bucks newsletter. Today's episode of Locked On Bucks is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. 1-5, Camille, is where we start. It is certainly suboptimal to be at 1-5 and see what the Cleveland Cavaliers are doing to the Eastern Conference. I suppose this is one of the last times we can really cling to this hopium, but you and I were talking before we started recording. Mm-hmm. I haven't closed the door on this team yet. I know a majority of you probably have, and I don't think there's anything you or I can say that's going to talk people out of that there is a lot of, this feels like last year, the record, the age, all of it. I get it. So if you're out, you're out. That's not where we are yet. But it's not to say, hey, everything is fine and it's going to work out perfectly. The tough part is I think that game was their best game of the season. Mm-hmm. Better than Philly, where we talked about everything went well for you. And I think every single player that played a pretty good game. The caveat of there was no Joel Embiid or Paul George, but it's the only game this season you won. I think they looked better Saturday night than they did in Philly on the season opener. Maybe not individually, but Giannis and Dame certainly did. Their defense, I thought, played really good against the Cavs. It certainly played well enough for you to win the game. It was just a couple of the same issues, that loose piece of thread on the sweater that you just keep pulling at, and certainly it unravels. It's kind of where we've been trapped with this team for the first 6 games.
Yeah, and that's what makes this particular loss against the Cavs on Saturday night such a heartbreaker, because you were right there in it. You saw the effort they came out with. Like, the Bucks have gotten off to some slow starts this season. That wasn't the case against the Cavaliers. You saw them come into the game shooting lights out to open that first quarter. The vibes were really good in Pfizer for them. You felt the crowd in the game. Everything was rolling for them. Then Cleveland fights back in the second quarter. Third quarter comes, Cleveland keeps fighting back. Fourth quarter is a back and forth affair between the two teams, and we thought that Dame hit that game winner, thought it was Dame time. Yeah. Donovan Mitchell gets the ball, almost has a backcourt violation. Then the ball gets poked away from him. You think he might lose it there. He still retains possession of it. Goes up for a tough mid-range shot and knocks it down. It's like 0.3 seconds left. Dame has a chance at getting the game winner himself, but just doesn't get the shot off in time, doesn't make it. Bucks lose. In a game where the process throughout the game felt a lot better, a lot more strong throughout the game than what you've seen in prior games, but just not enough to come out with the victory. So it's one of those games where you can look at different things. Some people are looking at Gary Trent Jr. saying, hey, you make one more shot, it's a different game. He was getting good looks. I am not mad at the shots that Gary Trent Jr. has been taking. They're just not falling, but he has to keep shooting those shots. Like, Dame and Giannis combined for 75 points in this game. Giannis shot the ball 27 times. Dame shot it 24 times.
Dame
Like
hit 10 threes.
right. They needed other guys to shoot the ball, other guys to make something happen. Shout out to Torian Prince, 4 or 5 for 3 in that game. But like outside of that, and Bobby Portis gave you 10 on 10 shots. Like there wasn't much offense. And a problem for the Bucks they have to continue to try to work around is just those bench rotations. Because they're getting eaten alive when that bench comes into the game.
So a lot to unpack from that. I guess, and this may well just turn into a full-on post-game pod over Saturday night. We'll preview night 2, that game in Cleveland tonight, which has not treated the Bucks too kind in recent years. But let's start with the Gary Trent piece there. I agree with you. Very good looks that he had. He needs to keep shooting. I haven't lost any trust or faith in Gary Trent Jr. I mean, it's kind of in some ways similar to the team as a whole, where I know I had mentioned, and I think we talked about it on one of the shows last week, every team goes through stretches like this. I don't think it's just that of like, this is just a bad stretch for the Bucks. There's obviously other pieces to this, but the point is every team goes through stretches like this multiple times a season. Unfortunately for the Bucks, it comes their first 6 games of the season, and there's the most visibility on it. Same for Gary Trent, where players will go through those shooting slumps. Every single player on the team broke out of a shooting slump other than Gary Trent Jr. on Saturday night. But why I haven't lost any confidence, and it's not like, why did we sign this guy? And some of that, you haven't thankfully seen a ton of that yet. But I do think it's going to take time for Gary Trent Jr. to look like what we envision. I know I talked about this last week with just Giannis working on his chemistry with seemingly every year a new 2-guard that's out there, that it's always kind of taken a little bit of game time reps to figure out, okay, this is where that player likes to stand in the corners, or the player saying this is where Giannis attacks from. This is when Giannis usually kicks it out. So that's part of it. I think in the terms of Gary Trent versus the other guys that have filled those shoes, Gary Trent Jr. is being asked to play a much different style than he has all throughout his career. It is primarily catch and shoot. Like, that's the job of the 2-guard for the Bucks in this era. Play defense, take a lot of corner threes, or at least catch and shoot variety threes. That's not where Gary Trent Jr. took the majority of his shots. Like, he was a guy that would move off of screens and movement shooter. I know we said the same about Bees last year, that he was more of a movement shooter. With Gary Trent Jr., it's I think exacerbated. It's more than just threes.
He's a creator.
Yeah, he is a creator. So I think that's what's really going to take the most time, and to find him that comfort to slip into what this role is. And, you know, I think it's also going to be a give and take of, I know this is what we want the role to be, but I know you need some of this to get going. So finding that middle ground, I think that's going to be the process with Gary Trent Jr. So that's why I haven't lost any faith in Gary Trent in this role. The toughest part about Saturday was just how good Giannis and Damian Lillard looked together. Not just the 75 points that they scored, not just Dame hitting 10 threes, but that specific 2-man game between those two. It was everything we hoped that we would see from this pairing. A couple of things that really stood out to me I want to get into after the break, because I thought this was the best game we have seen from Giannis in quite some time. And that says something for how efficient he was a year ago, but just all things considered, the spot this team was in, how he looked offensively, how he looked with Dame, how he looked on the other end. This was a remarkable game from Giannis. So I do want to get into that conversation and a couple of more takeaways from what we saw Saturday night against the Cavs coming up after the break here on Locked On Bucks. This next segment of Locked On Bucks is sponsored by BetterHelp. And look, this month is all about gratitude. And along with the person that we just shout out, or people in our family we shout out that we give that gratitude to, there's another person that you want to make sure receives that gratitude: ourselves. It's sometimes hard to remind ourselves that we are trying our best to make sense of everything. And in this crazy world, that certainly isn't easy. So here's a reminder to send some thanks to the people in your life, and include yourself when doing so. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. To get started, all you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire. From there, you'll get matched with a licensed therapist. You can even switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. So what really stood out to me was the actions that we saw Giannis and Damian Lillard together. And Camille, I know I have, I suppose, been hard on Giannis in one area, and that is screen setting. It was incredible Saturday night. Like, it was almost as if Giannis said, "Oh, you guys don't think I can set screens? Here, I'm going to go do it," because there were some forceful screens that he set that freed up Damian Lillard. I remember one sequence early, I think it was in the first quarter, where I thought the Bucks were very patient at times, too. Not at times, throughout the course of the game. You could argue they were too patient in passing up some good looks where you started to see, oh, now we got to scramble to get a shot off here. But there was one of those stretches where Giannis and Dame were trying to get something going, and the Cavs kind of blew it up. It wasn't what they needed, and you could see Giannis like almost agitated, telling Dame, like, "No, set it up again. Just give me the ball here," and pointed to the spot at the floor and like, "Come here, trust me." And Giannis sets a screen to free Dame up. Dame hits a three, and Giannis was just pumping his fists in the air as he ran down the court, where you could see, man, they are really they worked on this, and they are really eager to show this off. That I left so impressed with all those little things that Giannis was doing to make sure that pairing worked as well as it did Saturday night.
You saw them having fun with it too. Like, seeing them celebrate after big buckets, seeing them clapping and cheering each other on was super dope in this game, because a lot of the losses that they've had so far this season, it seemed like the guys just weren't even having fun being on the court. Like, you could see the energy just not being there at the time for them. So seeing that against the Cavs on Saturday was there. I was with you on the screens. I actually tweeted out early on. I think it was during like that first opening 9-0 run to start the game off. The second three that Dame had, where Giannis had a solid screen for Dame, freed him up for the three. And I was like, I'm at home cheering for a screen right now. Like, we got the three out of it, but like, yes, seeing Giannis stand in there and actually set a decent screen.
That was it. Like, that was it for me. It was just like, man, this was an actual screen, like
a real one.
Yeah, like I think you and I both, like, I don't want to get too far down the road of like, why can't Giannis set screens? Fine. Yes, it's something, certainly if you're a coach too, that you can bitch about and say, hey man, you got to really be set there and you got to sell it. Sure. But it's also Giannis. Like, there's a give and take here that he needs to also be the guy that's slipping and attacking it and doing all that. So we're not asking him to just be a screen setter, but man, just the screens that he set Saturday night, if that's what we get going forward, I feel really good about this team starting to pull out of this.
Same here, because it's little things. It's detail. It's been that with this Bucks team. It's been the little things. It's been setting screens. It's been boxing out. It's been getting back in transition. It's been so many of the little things. But in addition to Giannis and Dame combining for the 75 points, the amazing dime that Giannis had to Dame, where I thought Giannis was going G-ball at the rim. He has the behind the back pass to Dame for three. Beautiful.
And he did the Steph Curry too. He gave him the behind the back and just immediately
just
put the hand up in the air and knew, like, that's good.
It was cool seeing that the two of them combined for 18 assists as well. Like, each of them had 9 assists. They were looking to get other teammates involved. They were active. They were aggressive hunting their own shots, but they were also doing so in a way to make sure that their teammates were staying involved in the game, which I loved. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about more in depth, and I was waiting for this conversation, waiting for this pod, is just an area of concern with this team around the Bobby Portis minutes, some of the bench minutes that we have been seeing, because in this game, you saw the tide turn quite a bit when the Bobby Portis members were coming. It was a really bad Bobby game against Cleveland on Saturday, offensively and defensively, and it felt like he was getting sped up, and then he was getting emotional, and then he was doing things out of frustration in the game, and it wasn't working out for Bobby in this particular game. After the Memphis game, Doc Rivers was talking about, like, listen, we're drilling all this stuff consistently when it comes to transition defense, when it comes to how we want to run our systems. And maybe there needs to be some more consequences going forward if people aren't able to do what we're telling them to do. And in this game, look at the final numbers and you're like, okay, well, Bobby still played his 20 minutes, but Pat Connaughton was the last sub off the bench. Pat Connaughton only played 10 minutes. You saw Andre Jackson Jr. being the guy.
Another game early.
Coming in the game, getting 15 minutes, being one of the first off the bench, and not fouling out quickly. Like, he had 3 fouls in 15 minutes, which for Andre, that's progress.
Progress. Right?
That's progress. So just wanted to get your thoughts on that too, because even after the game, Doc talked a bit more about that. Which is saying, like, I got to figure the bench out. Like, he likes going small. He mentioned how he's been waiting for Chris Middleton to come back to really lean into,
to really go smaller.
Yeah. We saw a little bit of that, but he's like, I really want to see it with Chris. But he was saying, maybe I got to search rotations, search different combinations, but we have to find something. And it seems like the door is still open to see more tinkering in the rotation from what we've already seen earlier, or so far this season, I should say.
We've actually gotten, well, I shouldn't say actually. I mean, Doc is a very candid guy. We've gotten a lot from him these last 2 games in the pre and post game settings. So you mentioned after the Grizzlies game using that word consequences. So he was asked, and I can't recall who it was that asked him, can you give us a little more clarity on this? Like, what do you mean? Is it players being taken out of the rotation, benched, minutes, what? And he said, well, first of all, I use that word consequences all the time in practice. The only way you can build good habits in life is with consequences. With transition defense, I told the guys at some point, we have to move. It's not a threat. It's just, we have to move. It's part of building habits. It doesn't have to be personnel change for the year. So we're not talking about cutting guys or trading them, or this guy just isn't going to play again. It can be a sub in the game. So I think that's what opens the door, though, to just removing a role or expanding a role. And at this point, it's hard not to think that's what we're seeing with Andre. And look, I think part of the Bobby Portis discussion, and I heard shouts to our guy Ty, who was just on with on the dunker
spot.
With Snapper's kid and with Nikias Friday, I think right before the game. And I think you and I may have talked about this before. It might have been with Ty. But he made the point. And when you watch this iteration of the Bucks, I think it stands out even more. Bobby Portis, I think the big question is, was this role more conducive to the old Bucks when you had a defensive crew, when you had Drew Holiday and Wesley Matthews as your point of attack defenders, and Bobby was your 6th man that you basically said, we're playing defense, we just need you to come in and score. That's not what this role is now. Like, you have Giannis and Dame, and especially if they're going to look close to what we saw Saturday, and it does seem like they're starting to at least turn a corner in terms of their chemistry. Like, if you have that, if you reintroduce Chris Middleton, and maybe realistically Chris gives you 12 to 15 points a night, fine. Like, we've said they need a third scorer. That's it. The role, not just for Bobby, but for that bench primarily as a whole, is we just need matchups, guys that can come in and play defense. Like the first version of the Bucks under Bud, that bench was basically, we're going to give you a lead. Don't lose it. Or at least, like, don't lose all of it for us. And we kind of shifted away from that. And I think that's kind of the challenge with Bobby, is he's in an unfair spot too, of we need you to do something that is not your strength. And we saw how that went with Malik Beasley last year. But it certainly was one of the more glaring things that you saw on Saturday and that we've seen so far throughout the course of this season. And I think it ultimately just boils down to the fact that so much of their defense is going to be predicated on their offense, not putting them in bad spots, not putting them in transition opportunities, executing. And when that's not the case, as it wasn't early in the season, like, you've really got to be clamped down defensively, and they're still very much searching for that.
They really are. They really are. And maybe it is putting a square peg into a round hole or something like that with the role that they're asking of Bobby. It's just,
But part of the job is also like, look, fine, make it work though. Like,
yeah, figure out
shave
a
some
way.
off the corners and just squeeze in that hole.
Yeah, because if you're seeing offensive lulls when Bobby's in the game or whatever the case may be, then like reconstruct how you're trying to run that offense at that time. And I think with Bobby as well, part of it is because like you look at the wing rotation and thinking about the whole consequence thing, like you have quite a few different options to try to go to if you're saying like, hey, Pat Connaughton is not working out, for example. We have all these other guards and wings we can try in this rotation in this moment. But for the Bucks big rotation, it's like you have Brooke, you have Giannis, you have Bobby. Unless you're going to look to play small and eat up some of those power forward minutes with, Chris Middleton when he's healthy, with Taurean Prince, what are your other options there as well? Like, is it going to be, are you going to throw Tyler Smith into the fire for a couple minutes a night at this point in his career? Some might say, hey, it's like maybe like see what it looks like. Maybe he can steal a couple of minutes at the end of a quarter just to kind of, help with the rotation in itself, where he's not really a rotation member, but he's just playing 2-3 minutes a game, just trying to, take up some of those minutes. But they have to figure out a way to make it work because this is what you have. This is what you have. So whether it's the rotation, like if does he play better with Ajax next to him? Does he play better? Like find the combination that works the best. And I took some encouragement out of the fact that Doc mentioned, like, we're looking for it. Like, we're not satisfied with how it's been going, and we're going to keep trying to find it. So I do take some comfort in that of just saying, like, hey, they're not stuck to doing it just one way. They're willing and open to trying to find something that works because they're trying to get these wins as much as we want to see the Bucks get these wins.
And there's one more thing I think to touch on with that bench discussion. We'll do that and some numbers to share. Like, I don't want to turn it into just bashing Bobby. And I'm not saying that's what either of us are doing, but I don't want it to be the bashing Bobby Portis episode, especially in light of what Bobby shared with us from Saturday too.
Yeah. Milwaukee, so, if you know who broke into Bobby Portis' house, please share the information.
Well, if you do, I've got some serious questions.
Listen, we ain't trying to ask no questions on Locked On Bucks, but we want to make sure Bobby Portis does get his stuff back. That's foul.
So yeah, a couple other things to touch on with the bench, and then some numbers to point out as well. And oh, by the way, more Chris Middleton discourse. We'll get to all of that coming up after this here on Locked On Bucks. Time to talk to you now about our friends over at FanDuel as we get ready to tackle the rest of the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more, all on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports book partner of the NFL. So I think the other interesting thing, and I don't remember, I think it was before the Grizzlies game that we heard this, was Doc telling us, hey, by the way, DeLon Wright isn't 100%, I think was the kind of reading between the lines there, and that he's on a minutes restriction. And, he himself saying, yeah, the bench, it hasn't been great. We're still trying to figure it out. You referenced what he said after the game, but his exact quote, we got to figure that out. That's on us being the coaching staff. We haven't found the correct rotations yet, and we have to. You mentioned he liked going small, but said it's designed to use with Chris, which I don't know if that means Chris as the 4, if this is hey, we're really salivating over the possibility of seeing a front court that is Giannis, Taurean Prince, and Chris Middleton.
Together, yeah.
And then maybe you could have Dame and a DeLon right in the backcourt and feel like we can switch a lot of things here and we can offset some of those defensive issues that we have. But regardless, Doc was pretty blunt that we haven't quite figured out the bench piece just yet. And, you know, you mentioned what we've started to see in terms of minutes for some guys, 10 minutes for Pat Connaughton. Andre Jackson played 15. Like at this point, I think that's what you need from Ajax. You know, like I still have the questions that you and I kind of dug into before this season. And your one pushback would be, well, the offense and how does it really work? We saw him hit a corner three against the Cavs, and we saw him get another look that wasn't quite as good. And you just saw the rotations are slower of, all right, we'll let him shoot that. But that's one of the things I think you're just going to have to live with because of the issues you've run into defensively. Once again, you just kind of need Andre and another guy that can pressure the ball and be an outlet to handle the ball too. Like I think that's one of the reasons why Doc has had such a long leash on Pat Connaughton, because he's a vet, because he has that experience and chemistry with Giannis and the rest of those guys. But also, you know, Frank has mentioned this. I think you've mentioned it a number of times this season too. Like the Bucks are still short creators, and it really stands out with no Chris Middleton that it's basically just Dame and to a lesser extent DeLon Wright.
Yeah, very true. And for the Andre offensive piece of it, like one way they're going to be able to utilize him offensively is just because he can set some pretty good screens as well.
Yeah.
We know teams are going to try to hide their weakest defenders on Andre Jackson Jr., have him in the corner, hide him. If you can bring Andre into action, setting screens to get, you know, Dame into more favorable offensive matchups, so on and so forth, there are ways that you can exploit that as well, which of course you're going to then see teams try to counter that, understanding they're going to try to put the guy in actions and maybe switch some things up there, but force them to make an adjustment off of that as well. So I think the Andre screen game is a way to keep him on the floor offensively, but when he has the opportunity to score, he's going to have to take it. Like he had the nice step back three against Cleveland, but he also had a possession where he was like at the rim and thought he should have went up with it, but he tried to kick it out. It was a turnover. Like those situations, like just being a little bit more aggressive at times, but Andre himself has a really good understanding. Like he was talking about it after the game. Like, I'm not here to shoot a bunch of shots. Like I'm here to get Dame the shot, to get whoever the open shot. Like I understand what my role is, but I'm going to, you know, try to score when I have to, but I just have to take advantage of it. So just want to see how they continue trying to utilize him. Want to see if maybe AJ Green comes back into the rotation.
That was my next point, is if there's one takeaway I have of Doc himself saying the rotations haven't worked, that's usually when you see things start to expand of, all right, let's see what this guy can give us. And if you produce, you stick. I think, you know, we've cautioned it's too early to panic. It's not too early to suggest, look, I think we just need to see more Ajax and more AJ Green.
Yeah, I think so. I would love to see some AJ Green lineups taking a little bit more of those Pat Connaughton minutes, especially on nights when you're seeing like Pat doesn't have it right now. Like let's make the switch, throw AJ in there, see if he can knock down the first couple of threes. If so, continue to ride that hot hand for the rest of the night. So the Bucks have a few different other options they can try to throw out there while they're still waiting for Chris Middleton to come back. But of course, when Chris comes back, that does change the rotations a lot and puts guys in different places. So ultimately, this is a top-heavy Bucks team. We went into the season knowing that, understanding how important Giannis and Dame and Chris were to the success of this team. They need all three parts to be healthy for the team to work as they thought that it could. But performances that we saw against Chicago and Brooklyn in particular were the two where it's like, you shouldn't need Chris to look more competent than what you have. But against Cleveland and against Boston, you see like they're playing with better effort. They're hanging in the game. It's competitive. They just weren't able to sustain a full game of effort, and they need to figure that piece of it out.
All right. So let's just address the elephant in the room. Chris Middleton is out again for this game against the Cleveland Cavaliers. Doc was asked before the first game against the Cavs at home about the possible ramp up period for Chris Middleton, in that the G League season starts Wednesday. So in theory, I don't think it was suggested of like Chris could play with the hurt. I think it was more of a 5-on-5 work in that
Right.
type of thing to get in there. Doc said no, there's not going to be any G League work. We're still working with him. We do have enough guys for 5-on-5, so that isn't a concern for us at the moment to get him work. I think it does need to happen. I haven't checked in on that enough to know if that is an answer, but yeah, it's something that we can very easily do. And even if it's just bringing guys to Milwaukee with the season starting, we can do that to get him those reps. And also talked about AJ Johnson going down
Mhm.
to the being assigned to the Wisconsin Herd these past couple of games as well, in saying that, because Tyler Smith is not, and the method to the madness there is we don't want him to just sit on the bench and not play is a big part of it. But as Doc said, he's going to be a point guard. I want him to be a point guard. I told him that is your role, that you're going to be the point guard, and we are going to teach you how to run a team. So that's why, in the case of AJ Johnson specifically, we've sent him to the Herd for now, so he can get those game minutes. He can work with those coaches, and we can work on drilling in. This is how you run an offense. Not to say Tyler Smith's role is going to be any less important in the future, but you're basically like, just keep doing what you're doing. Just rebound and shoot threes. But with AJ, you got to figure out how to run an offense. So that was the reasoning there. I have no further updates on Chris Middleton. Like, I was asked by somebody else too, like, when do you expect him to return? I don't know. Like we've been given no clarity on that. We've been told it's no setbacks or anything. Like, you kind of get the vibes of how Philly is handling the Joel Embiid spot of, maybe Joel Embiid's a 40-game-a-year player from now on and doesn't play in back-to-backs, and we just need to make sure he's healthy. We're not going to play him if he's not 100%. You kind of get the sense that that's the case with Chris Middleton. So I've just long given up on projecting of, okay, so they have a stretch in the schedule where they have 2 days off and then they play at home. Maybe it's here. Like, who knows? When he returns, it's going to be great. But I don't know when that's going to be.
Yeah, I was hoping that it might be one of these Cleveland games just based on how things were going.
Camille, I was hoping it was going to be Wednesday, October 23rd, whatever it was.
At this point, yeah, it's we're just in a waiting game. Like, the information that has been given, it's just soon. All that we know is, as you said, there's been no setbacks. It's just hasn't happened yet, and we know that he is not going to be playing tonight on Monday against the Cavaliers. I saw Giannis is listed as questionable in this game as well on Monday. So we'll see how that goes.
I think it's the third game this season Giannis has been listed as questionable, and I don't think it's been for the adductor before. So a new quote-unquote injury or just status to be aware of there. And then, look, you get 2 days off before your next game, which is at home. So there's that. And then you get another 2 days or day off in between, and a lot of home games coming up for this Bucks team. So, yeah, I don't know. And there's no point of us trying to put any type of guess on when Chris Middleton is going to make a return. But speaking of Chris, so a couple of final things to throw your way as we start to wrap up here. When they do get Chris Middleton back, and I know I mentioned numbers that we had to share here. 2 things really stood out to me about that game against the Cavs. The Bucks were really good in transition, both offense and defense. And I think defensively, all things considered, where they've been, they were really good in transition defense. The Cavs were basically not creating any points in those transition opportunities. The Bucks at one point in that first half had a 250 offensive rating in transition. And they were the team in that first quarter, especially, that was aggressively looking to start fast breaks and push the pace. So I think that's one thing that stood out of, look, as you hear, the best offense is a good defense and vice versa. Like, maybe this is let's just push it first. Like, if we do that, they can't do it to us, at least in theory. So that was one notable thing. For a while, their half-court offense was pretty good too. And it's held up overall. I mean, you take the shooting out of it, that brought it down in those last few games. The numbers dropped as the game progressed, but in the first half especially, it wasn't just the Bucks getting out on the break and scoring in transition. They had a really good half-court offense. And their half-court defense against the Cavs was at a 102.2, which is just better than league average. So you're starting, maybe it's just one game, but you're starting to see some of those steps forward. I think the big thing for tonight is, yeah, it's the fourth time we've said this, but like, do it again.
Yep.
Right? Like, even if you lose, and I know it is not ideal to be 1-6, even if you lose, but it's under similar circumstances as Saturday night, I'll feel pretty good to see this team put together back-to-back games like that against a really good team. Say, okay, I feel like this is starting to head in the right direction. And everything Doc has said about, I think we're going to go on a run pretty soon. There's things that I've seen in the last 96 minutes of basketball that make me believe that is within reach here. The last thing is Chris Middleton specifically. So when he does make his return, do you think Bobby Portis could be the player whose minutes are impacted and not someone like Taurean Prince or someone else? So in other words, we heard Doc mention the small ball lineups. We talked about this last week. The minutes where it's Giannis and Bobby on the floor, it's just not working. And look, it's a small sample size. I get it. It's not good enough right now. That in those minutes, the Bucks have a 96.5 offensive rating. That is in the first percentile. They have a 124.7 defensive rating. So the offense has been stuck in mud. The defense has been really bad. And so is their net rating of a -28. So those minutes, it's not just the 6 games this season. We started to see some signs of it last year that you don't have the benefit of a second rim protector, and you don't have the benefit of really switchability and pliability defensively. And I think that's what's kind of caught up to them on the defensive end. If we just look at the minutes with their starters, it's not like last year when they were world beaters, but it's still pretty good numbers. An offensive rating that's pushing 120, a defensive rating that's 115.5, which is right around league average. And as you and I have said, like, if the offense is what we expect it to be, a league average defense should be good enough for this group. So, like, that is one thing you have seen of, look, when the starters play, they're a lot better. It's just the bench that's been an issue. So to round that all together, I know we kind of kicked this around in the summer too, but ideally, is this we pick our spots with Bobby, and Bobby is more of Brooks' backup, and we can play Taurean Prince at the 4. At times, we can play Chris Middleton at the 4 next to Giannis too. And once you get healthy, that just gives you the opportunity to say, well, Bobby, you're a backup 5. And it's not a knee-jerk, we just have to move on and trade Bobby Portis and find something and get, whatever it is in return for him. Maybe it's, we got to find ways that we can really find something that fits for him on this team. And that might just be backing up Brook Lopez.
Could be it. I definitely do think that when Chris comes back, he is somebody who will see those minutes shrink a bit, just given the fact that Doc was already honest with us in saying that, he has been eyeing a small ball lineup. This isn't the first time we've heard him mention it. He mentioned it last season when he came aboard as well, but he mentioned the fact that Chris got hurt, wasn't able to really install some of the things that he was hoping to see with those small ball lineups as well. So I do think that when he returns, we will see Bobby's minutes shrink a little bit for Chris Middleton, in addition to maybe Taurean Prince and play, as many himself, but the biggest hit might come from Bobby Portis. So I think that's an option going forward. And I think, again, Chris coming back just makes things make a bit more sense. I would, again, caution people to understand that I don't think either one of us.
He's not the savior, but
not the savior for this Bucks team at all. But he does open some doors and helps with versatility and just helps with lineups that makes more sense when he's available. So that's part of the reason why I'm looking forward to Chris coming back. It's not just the offense. People are going to say, well, he can't move defensively either. So maybe if you do play him up, that helps, since the lateral quickness doesn't have to be as much. But he also offers so much with the playmaking, with the shot creation, just with the intelligence being on the court and helping to communicate where guys need to be as well. So yeah, I'm very excited for Chris to come back. I can't wait for him to come back at this point. And I feel like the wait is going to continue until a date that none of us know at this point. So at the moment, just hoping to see better effort, continued sustained effort from this team against Cleveland and tonight. And then again, because after this Cleveland game, which as you mentioned, it could be a situation where the Bucks are looking up like, dang, we're 1-6. But then you have the Jazz on Thursday, the Knicks Friday, the Celtics at home on Sunday, and then the Raptors on Tuesday at home in the first NBA Cup game. So, like, the Bucks had a tough start to the season, one of the toughest, initial 10-game slate of any team in the league based on last year's schedule. So it should lighten up a bit for them coming out of this, but they have to continue to sustained effort and successes from one game to another. We want to see them play a full game more consistently than what we have so far.
Yeah, everything kind of bleeding together. I couldn't remember when is it this week? Is it the next week where they have the Thursday, Friday game? So they back to back this week, a back to back next week. Like we mentioned, the amount of back to backs they have. It's a very tough schedule overall, but especially in the early portion of that schedule. Leave your thoughts as well. I expect to hear a lot of same name sentiment here, but leave your thoughts on what we've seen. What is the best usage of Chris Middleton in this group? If you're the coach, what are some of the pairings that you're looking at for this bench? Because Doc Rivers has said, look, what we've tried hasn't worked so far. So leave your thoughts on that. And I suppose we didn't get into it on this show, Camille, but now that we know they're 1-5, what do you think the record is going to be through the first 10 games? So leave that in the comments as well, where you project this team to be after they wrap up that 10-game stretch with the Celtics. Jeez. What they're going to be then, and how big of a hole this team is going to need to start to dig out of. That'll do it for today's show. We have the post-game show. This was kind of a post-game show, but the immediate post-game show of part 2 against the Cavaliers. So hopefully we're talking about a lot of the same things, but the result is different tonight in Cleveland. Consistency is what we're looking for. Just the same level of play that you saw. It's not even effort or any of that, but the same level of play you saw Saturday against the Cavs. Just show it to me once more, and then I'll start to feel a lot better about where this team is moving in the right direction. That'll do it for today, though. For Camille, I'm Justin. We will talk to you once again tomorrow on Locked On Bucks.